One Climate Channel. It's Anuradha Vitachi speaking now to Sanjay Khanna.
Khanna, yeah.
And we're going to have quite an interesting and unusual discussion now, not at all like many we've had. And I'll start by asking Sanjay what he really cares about, what this is all about, his life's work. What's his real message to us all?
Hi. My message is that there's a good chance, as we all know, that COP15 won't deliver the kind of substantive agreement that might allow us to reduce carbon emissions and carbon concentrations in the atmosphere that would protect many countries around the world and regions from catastrophic climate impacts. And as I started to think about this problem, I realized that we were going to face the challenge of how to keep this civil in civil society. How would we maintain civility under the kinds of pressures that we're facing, and how might that impact the mental and physical well-being of people? How might it affect community interconnections, and how might we respond with the psychological and social resilience we need to maintain as much civility as we can under many conditions that will become very difficult over the next 2 decades or so.
Well, it's a really important point. We talk about water wars, for instance, and refugees coming into countries. I'm a refugee myself, and it has taken me a long time living in England for most of my life to feel maybe I'm accepted, but much more difficult for people coming in without, in such terrible, difficult conditions. And how... and with a great sense of being rejected by the host community. And even if you're not suffering under those extreme conditions, if you are simply having to face the changes that are going to be taking place in the world, maybe not even directly in your own family, but to other people you read about, you see on the news or whatever, it's going to be very hard for people to cope. So I'm delighted that you're thinking about this and working on this. So in what way, for instance, I have children and grandchildren, and they worry, and the little ones especially worry tremendously. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my parents? What's going to happen to my future? How would you deal with this, Sanjay?
Well, I've been tracking climate change issues since Jim Hansen first gave his first congressional testimony in 1989, and when my son, 10 years later, when my son was 10 years old, I started to talk to him about the importance of friendship and community. I counseled him that his academic achievement was less important than his ability to make friends who would create a roof over his head, places where he could sleep at night and have a couch. And I told him that if he got an A in friendship and a C in his academics, I would be much happier than if he became very competitive and lost friends, because now is the time of finding alternate currencies that we can exchange, and friendship is going to be one of those currencies that will help build trust as confidence begins to falter in large-scale economic systems.
That's a really beautiful thing to say. To get an A in friendship. And I've seen it with our children too. And some of them are really wonderful at making friends, and it's such an amazing asset. I don't mean just in a kind of sense of capital, but in the sense of real empowerment of all of them. They rely on each other in an amazing way, and they do amazing things as a result, because they can do it together. They understand about collaboration, they understand about teamwork, and we're all going to have to understand about that. The national delegations here really need a training, the sort of training that young people nowadays give to each other, don't you think?
Well, yes, and from a climate change perspective, there's one thing, it's a really good example of this. There's a climate scientist named Veerabhadran Ramanathan, who teaches at the Scripps Institution in the University of California, San Diego. He's been doing research on black carbon, so how the use of stoves in India and China releases a large amount of soot that lands on the Himalayas and that actually accelerates the melt of the Himalayan ice. So the solution to that is different kinds of stoves that burn more efficiently and would stop the release of black carbon into the atmosphere. So one has to wonder, why wouldn't the global community simply find the few $1 billion or tens of millions of dollars or whatever, I don't know the number, but the money needed to simply replace those devices. Well, people are looking for funding models for this. They're developing, funding models so that, people have to, buy these things because that's, would help their self-esteem and would do all kinds of things. And using market approaches in this kind of crisis for certain very basic things that would have a significant impact in slowing the melt of the Himalayan glacier, given what the consequences are for India and China, would be kind of important. And whereas young people will just share things. They'll just say, oh, you need this, I'll give it to you, you're my friend. And I think that's an ethic that is not there enough in the global processes of government to government, intergovernmental relations that we would do well by.